say that drop me an email later, and I can send you more about stuff I've done.
Okay, great.
And if you're interested. When they brought me last time, I did investigative journalism, just a basic introduction to investigative journalism.
Cool.
But I've done video production, audio, radio production, podcasting, all that sort of stuff.
I'm going to be on my way out soon. I only have about another month here, but I'm going to be doing cultural affairs in Mumbai.
In where?
Mumbai.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I'll probably be in charge of the program, and we'll also have a lot of work to do on climate. So yeah, if interested in teaching Indian audience, I might come up.
It'll be wonderful.
Sorry, Dale. Sorry. We're trying to stream now.
Okay.
We're just gonna mute it, everyone. Thank you.
Variava, Wakil Duta Besar Amerika Serikat di Indonesia. Menyambut datangnya bulan Ramadan, saya mendoakan keberkahan selama sebulan penuh bagi semua yang menjalani. Di saat-saat penuh ketidakpastian dan kecemasan yang sedang berlangsung saat ini, saya terinspirasi oleh berbagai kisah mengenai harapan, kemanusiaan, dan kedermawanan yang tak terhitung yang kita miliki bersama. Semoga bulan ini memperkuat persahabatan kita. Selamat menunaikan ibadah puasa.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another At America TV event with me, Jasmine. I hope you all are doing well. So for those of you joining us for the first time, At America is the U.S. Embassy's American Center, and our mission is to provide a space for young Indonesians to learn more about the United States. We have temporarily moved to a digital platform so you can still enjoy all of our events at the comfort of your own home. So for tonight, we will be discussing Knowledge at America, reporting on the environment together. But before we begin tonight's event, I would like to share with you that At America is having a giveaway as part of our 10th anniversary celebration and also a celebration of Earth Day this month. We're inviting you to participate in our giveaway so you don't miss out on a chance to receive one of the 5 folding bikes that we are giving out. So how can you participate? Stay tuned until the end of the program because that's when I'll be sharing with you how to do so. And also, as usual in all of At America's events, I would like to share with you our social media quiz question for this evening. So, the question is, what are the challenges environmental journalists face? Is it A, lack of environmental and scientific training, B, limited access to governmental data on environmental conservation, C, perception of its minor relevance compared to other topics, or D, all of the above? So which one is the correct answer? You can participate in our social media quiz by commenting on our social media platform on our Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or Instagram. And for those of you who got the answer correctly, you will get a live shout out from us at the end of the program. All right, before we begin tonight's event, I would like to invite for the opening remarks from the U.S. Embassy, Jakarta, Ibu Sita Ryder, Deputy Press Attaché.
Selamat malam semuanya. My name is Sita Ryder. I'm the Deputy Press Attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta. Welcome to At America. Thank you all for tuning in this evening for Reporting on the Environment Together. I would also like to thank our distinguished panelists, Dale Willman and Harry Surjadi, and our moderator, Andari Karina Anom. Thank you also to everyone in the audience for joining us tonight. Many of you are professional journalists and students from university programs in journalism, engineering, agriculture, and environmental studies. Happy Earth Day, everyone. The theme of this 51st Earth Day is Restore Our Earth. This year, more than ever, citizens and leaders worldwide are in agreement that we must take action to restore our Earth and address challenges posed by climate change. The United States has placed climate change at the center of its foreign policy, and today President Biden is hosting 40 world leaders, including President Joko Widodo, at the Leaders Summit on Climate. From April 22nd to 23rd, nations will join forces to cut emissions and raise climate ambition. The summit aims to keep the vital goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach, a key milestone on the road to the UN Climate Change Conference this November. The full summit will be live streamed for public viewing, and I welcome all of you to tune in at www.state.gov/climate summit. In the face of global climate threats, the US government is committed to working with international organizations, civil society, and other governments to help preserve the planet's natural beauty for generations to come. There is much work to be done, but we are intently focused on policies and programs that conserve and restore forests, that promote sustainable agriculture and fisheries, that stop illegal logging, mining, and fishing, and that combat wildlife trafficking and marine plastic pollution. But just as no single government can solve the climate crisis alone, civil society and the media play a key role in reporting on threats and galvanizing action. New technologies have diversified the tools used for reporting, who is considered a reporter, and the ways that scientists and traditional media collaborate to produce credible and database stories. Tonight, I hope we will learn new techniques and best practices to produce strong environmental journalism in the face of competing interests. The U.S. Embassy in Jakarta is very pleased to support this discussion, and I thank you all once again for tuning in.
Thank you, Ibu Sita, for the warm welcome. And now to start this evening's event, I would like to invite our moderator from Binus University International, Ibu Andari Karina Anom, Head of Communication Program.
Thank you, Yasmin. Okay, so good evening and good morning to you, Dale. Yeah, US time. Hello, everyone. Happy Earth Day to all of us. So today we are going to celebrate the Earth Day by having this topic on Knowledge at America. The topic today will be reporting on the environment together. There are many ways for us to love the earth. There are many ways for us to celebrate the Earth Day. Yeah? One way to do it is by writing, by reporting, by share news about environment. So I believe tonight we have two distinguished speakers, the people that we can learn about how to produce a good writing, a good reporting, and also share news about environment. It cannot only be done by professional journalists, but actually every one of us. We can be citizen journalism. We can also report. We can also write. We can also share about environment. Not only because today is the Earth Day, but we can do it actually in regular basis. We can collaborate to produce good and beneficial content. Yeah, maybe for students, maybe for journalists and public in general who wants to involve, who wants to also contribute. Yeah, writing or creating content, creating anything, share news about environment. Today, we are very happy to have two distinguished speakers, the best, the expert from the environmental fields, both of them journalists, was a journalist, and now also doing training in journalism in environment issue. Allow me to introduce Dale Willman. Hey, Dale. How are you, Dale?
Good evening. Good evening.
Yes, good morning to you. Yeah, it's a
Yes.
snowy day in there. Yeah, you showed me your surrounding earlier. So Dale is the Associate Director of the Resilience Media Program for the Earth Institute. The program is part of the Institute's new initiatives on communication and sustainability. During this pandemic time, the project's first goal is to give journalists tools to better cover issues surrounding the healthcare crisis and to show them how to better envision stories that look toward solution, which I think can also be implemented to environmental issue, right, Dale? And then he has reported and taken photographs on 5 continents. He worked as a journalist, both as reporter and photographer. Dale is also an award-winning news anchor, editor, reporter, yeah, and trainer with experience more than 15 years in Washington. He worked for NPR, CBS, and CNN. And there are a lot of things that he will share, he will discuss with us today regarding the reporting on the environment together. And our second speaker, Pak Hari Suryadi. Hai Pak Hari, selamat malam. Good evening.
Selamat malam.
Malam. Pak Hari also an expert on journalism and communication with specialization in environmental journalism and environmental communication, citizen journalism, and also corporate social responsibility. Previously, we know Pak Hari as an environment journalist in Environment Desk, yeah, a very famous one in Kompas, yeah, back then. Now he is the regional coordinator, Southeast Asia's Rainforest Journalism Fund at Pulitzer Center, and he is also an Ashoka Fellow since 2015, and currently a board member of World Federation of Science Journalists. So I think we are very happy. It's like an honor for us to have both speakers discussing about environment on the Earth Day today. Yeah. So I think, I hope that we can learn a lot from both speakers. Please, for audience, you are encouraged to ask or comment, give question through chat, and we will later try to go through it one by one, yeah, if we have time. Okay, so I think I will give the first I will give it to Dale first, to share about his presentation, about 25 minutes maximum, Dale, and then followed by Pak Hari later, and then we can open the Q&A session. Please, Dale, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Selamat malam. Give me just a moment to share my screen here, and I am excited to be with you on Earth Day. Happy Earth Day. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing to celebrate today. Hopefully you can see that okay now. It's a joy to be with you today. Let me see, is that showing up okay? Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Good, okay. It's a joy to be with you today, if only through Zoom, and I have a great love for Indonesia and all my friends there, including Pak Hari, who I'm very excited and interested to hear from this evening. And I've spent a lot of time in Indonesia. I lived in Bandung for a year and have traveled quite a bit around Indonesia. I've even spent time at the U.S. Embassy and at America, and that was me back when I was much thinner. I'm going to start with a really brief history lesson, so I hope you'll bear with me on this, and you'll understand why it's important in just a minute or two. My story starts more than 500 years ago. There was a man in Germany in the 1400s named Johannes Gutenberg, and he created something that changed the world. Until this invention, sharing information was very difficult. And because it was difficult, information was available to only a small group of people. Back then, printing was done by hand. A specialized group of people called scribes wrote each important document using simple pens. They were often made from feathers of birds dipped in ink. And each person was able to write just perhaps 1 or 2 pages a day. And that meant very few copies of documents could be made. It took a long time to complete a document, and it was also a very expensive process. Eventually, a hand press was invented that allowed maybe 40 pages to be printed each day. And that made access to information a little bit better. But it was still closely held among a small group of people. And because they owned the information, they controlled the world. But in the 15th century, Gutenberg invented the printing press, and suddenly many people had access to a piece of equipment that could print more than 3,000 pages a day. Now almost everyone could have access to information. The elite could no longer control everything, and the possibilities seemed endless. But this is important. It took about 50 years after this invention for people to truly understand what it meant and how to use it. The printing press is what was called disruptive technology. It totally changed how the world works. And because of this disruption, there was a lot of chaos for a very long time. It took years for people to get access to the technology, and many more years to figure out the best ways to use it and how to give people access to this. So why is this important today? Well, I ask you, does any of this sound familiar? Because the same thing is happening now. When I began in journalism many years ago, it was very expensive to operate a journalism outlet. The cost of printing presses, radio studios, and television towers, they were so costly, only the wealthiest people could have access to the media. And those with the access were the only ones who could decide what stories were being told. And the number of media outlets was small. Sure, there were local efforts to offer information to small groups, but if you wanted to reach a large audience, it was still expensive. And that meant many stories were never told. And the voices of those without money or access to power, they were often silent. The advances over the past 20 years in technology and electronics has changed all that. In the 1990s, it took a studio with $100,000 worth of equipment to produce a mixed radio piece. In that photograph, I'm sitting in one of those studios. Now anyone can do the very same thing with a free program on the computer. For Apple users, there's GarageBand. For PC users, there's Audacity, and there are many paid audio editing options as well. Sending video across the country or even next door once required the efforts of many people and a satellite uplink on a big truck and a large satellite dish to receive those images. Now, anyone with a mobile phone can stream live video, and often do, and it can reach people around the world. And sometimes when they do that, they're changing the world. And we'll talk about one example of that in a minute. We're once again in the middle of a period of disruption caused by this shift in technology, and we have no idea where the world of communications will be 20 years from now. even 10 years. But this disruption has already changed the way we see and the way we witness the world. And one of the biggest and long-lasting changes has been in how information is controlled. There's been an agreement for many years about journalism. There's been a system in place where journalists acted as what we call gatekeepers. And as journalists or journalism students, you know what gatekeepers are. They're the people who decided what information could make it onto the air or into the newspaper so it could then reach the people. And more importantly, they decided what was left out. This had been a very important role, and most journalists were responsible in their work. But in many cases, gatekeepers kept marginalized voices from being heard. And that's really important to remember. Those in the minority were not heard. Those without economic power were not heard. And sometimes government served in the gatekeeper role, and that presented even more problems. But there's one role of gatekeeping many people have either forgotten or they never realized. Good gatekeepers made sure the information that was being sent out was accurate. Credibility was important in this old view of the journalism world, and this is a major point to remember, and we'll come back to that in a minute. As I mentioned before, we're in a time of constant disruption, and one of the things that has changed is the role of the gatekeeper. Now people do not need to go through a gatekeeper to have their voice heard. They can create their own journalism and use social media platforms to get their voice out directly to the people. And today we call that citizen journalism. Citizens have traditionally been the consumers of journalism. They take journalism in. When I began in journalism many years ago, we were taught that the agreement between news producers and the consumers was very simple. As journalists, we would write important information and we would present it to citizens. The idea was that citizens will then become better informed and they'll act properly with the new information they've gained. For instance, people in Bekasi read about the pollution they're exposed to from all the trucks that take the toll road to Bandung. They become concerned and ask for changes. Or people in South Jakarta read stories about increasing crime and they demand better police protection. This is how the media traditionally worked. I had to throw this photo in. This is my children when we were in Bandung in one of the volcanoes surrounding Bandung, and our good friend Aris playing the role of bandit in this scene. Anyway, citizens are not served well by the media now. Media outlets may not have enough money to place journalists everywhere they're needed. Media owners may have other reasons for not covering an area. They may not want to offend business people, or they may not want to make government officials angry. So they may not cover certain stories that could make businesses or government officials look bad. Or just as likely, there is no media where you live. So that way of doing journalism has changed. And as the technology has become cheaper and easier to use, people suddenly realized they could tell their own stories instead of relying on a gatekeeper who may not think their story was important enough to be told. And they do that now through what is called citizen journalism. So what is citizen journalism? It depends on who you ask. And Pak Harry and I will have a little different definition of this, and that's okay. But citizen journalism has many definitions. And it can be as simple as someone taking a video and putting it on YouTube, or someone who witnesses police brutality streaming images of it live on Facebook, or even people using Twitter to warn neighbors about a tsunami heading their way following an earthquake. This is what happens in times of disruption. New roles are created and definitions are fluid. Remember, we talked about disruption. But if we're going to talk about citizen journalism, we need a good description of what it is. So for my discussion, I want to use this definition. Citizen journalism is the collection of information by people who have not been trained as journalists and the distribution of it through social media, public platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and through partnerships sometimes with traditional media outlets, which is one of the things we want to talk about tonight. It's about getting the word out to the public on important issues. So, who is a citizen journalist? It's someone who does acts of journalism without having received journalism training. This includes people who are purposely trying to offer information to people, as well as those who just happen to be on the scene when news happens and they report on it. And who isn't a citizen journalist? Well, someone who wants to use social media to sell something or to get back at someone. We all know someone who's been angry at someone and says things they shouldn't, or someone who wants to spread bad information. And we need to be able to tell the difference between these groups. Citizen journalism is less centralized than traditional journalism, and it can be found in many different forms. It could be a podcast talking about poor road conditions in the neighborhood, like this sinkhole in Bandung. It could be text messages identifying environmental damage. It could be live streaming a village meeting, and it could be a blog post that provides a commentary on some aspect of life in that community. These reports are generally digital. Remember how this current disruption came about because of the rapid changes in digital technology? And those reports can include texts, pictures, audio, and video. Social media plays a major role in disseminating news and promoting citizen journalism content. We see this happening across the world. Social media was used by organizers of the Arab Spring movement when they wanted the world to know about their demands for democracy in their countries. Social media was used when demonstrators closed down Wall Street in New York City. That's what this photo is from. And they did that to protest big businesses they felt were damaging the world. These are messages that were not getting out in the traditional media. There are many names for this kind of journalism. Some call it participatory journalism, or democratic journalism, or guerrilla journalism, or street journalism, but we're calling it citizen journalism because at its heart, it's always citizens who want to make their neighborhood or their village or their city a better place. There are many examples of citizen journalism right now, and in many different forms. Here in the United States, we have the George Floyd murder case, which you may have heard of. I took the photo you see right now at a rally that was sparked by the killing of Floyd. That rally was held in New York State last summer. The policeman who killed George Floyd was convicted just 2 days ago. And the key piece of evidence in that case was a video. That video showed a police officer kneeling on the neck of George Floyd for more than 9 minutes. And I'm sorry, I choke up every time I think of that video. That video was played over and over again across the country and around the world. It was likely the biggest piece of evidence that led to the police officer's conviction on murder charges. And the video was taken by a 17-year-old girl on her mobile phone. 17-year-old girl. She offered it to news organizations. That's a form of citizen journalism called collaborative journalism. Citizens work with news organizations to add to their stories. So how important was that video? And I can't stress this enough. Before that video was shown, this was how the Minneapolis police described what happened. A police officer knelt on a man's neck for more than 9 minutes. And afterward, the police described it in a news release as a medical incident. So can you imagine for a moment what might have happened if that video had not been available? How many times have police departments around the world avoided change because there was doubt about what actually happened? How many people have died because police officers were not accountable for their violence? And that video, shot by a 17-year-old, drove millions into the streets of America and streets in countries around the world and helped the family of George Floyd to receive justice. That is powerful. And it highlights one value of citizen journalism: accountability. Accountability for those in power to keep them from abusing that power. There are other examples of citizen journalism around the world. India has CGNet Swara, and this site really fascinates me because it's low tech and it's so important for reaching people. This site is part journalism and part community bulletin board. If you know bulletin board, in the old days, they had boards where people would put notices up for people to read about what was going on. Using their mobile phones, people can call in and report on or discuss issues of local interest. And this site is very simple to use. People dial the main phone number, and when the line is answered, they get a message that asks if they want to record a message or listen to a story. If they're recording a message, which could be a news story or a news tip, they press 1 and they leave their message. If they want to listen to a news story, they push 2, and then they have additional menus that guide them through the stories they can listen to. Whenever a report is recorded, trained journalists listen, and they review it first to make sure they're real concerns, and then they post them live for anyone to listen to. Of course, this doesn't work in areas where there is no internet and no phone signals. People can't report stories and they can't listen to the news. So in India and in Indonesia, that means a lot of people are still not served. But someone noticed that. And even in those areas without phone signals, they found that people in the villages still had mobile phones. Workers would use them when they went to the city for jobs. And while there, they would download music, and of course, and they'd return to their village, and they used the Bluetooth on their mobiles to transfer music to each other. So they thought, why not use this method for news too? And that's exactly what CGNet does. They have people download news in the city and then share it when they get back to their village. And they were smart about it. They realized the difficulty of asking people to use Bluetooth to share news with their community because Bluetooth quickly wears down the battery. So they wanted to provide a reason for people to do this. They created an app that gives everyone who shares a story over Bluetooth in their village 7 cents for each story. And they can use that money to recharge their phone with credits when needed. So that system has worked really well. Now even people in villages without access to news media or even access to regular phone service can get news about their communities. In Indonesia, of course, there is Kabar Indonesia, which I'm sure you all know about. The organization has thousands of citizen journalists providing that site with content. So how can you be a part of the citizen journalism movement? Or how can you begin to include citizen journalists in your work if you're already working at a more traditional journalism outlet? There are 3 major kinds of citizen journalism, and it's important to understand what they are in order for you or your organization to find a good fit. Independent reporting is where citizens work on their own, and they publish on their own, generally using social media. They might send something out on Twitter. It might be one person with a blog who writes about their community. It could be several people who have come together to produce their own electronic newsletter. Or it could be a bigger organization with its own website, but they're independent, and that's key. They're not a part of a traditional news organization. They often cover more social news, local sports and community events, and less hard news. And they often represent communities that have no news outlet. In fact, I started one here in my town at one point that I ran for 2 years. It actually was competing with the local journalism organization newspaper because they weren't doing a good job, and we forced them to do that with the newspaper, the website that I created. These sites often cover more social news. It's a good place for someone interested in doing citizen journalism to start, and there's very little cost, and most of that investment is simply on the time you spend writing and reporting. A second type is where citizen journalists work directly for a news outlet. They're given assignments by traditional news editors, and often they receive journalism training eventually. The final kind of citizen journalism, though, is a collaboration with traditional news organizations. The citizens have their own outlet, perhaps, but they also collaborate on some projects with traditional outlets. And collaborations have many benefits. They allow citizens to expand the reach of their work, and that brings more people to the stories they want to tell. In visual news, we call it more eyeballs, bringing more eyeballs to your stories. And because they're independent, they're not controlled by the news organization. But because they're not a part of the larger organization, it's possible they could also be ignored. And the news organization may take the stories that they want to offer them and end up just using it as a source rather than using it as journalism for their organization. So you have to be careful how that collaboration is designed. Citizen journalists have a lot to offer for any news organization that wants to find a way to work with them. They're often the first on scene for breaking news, getting these stories out more quickly than traditional media reporters. I love this. I took this photo in Bandung, and I still wonder how that car was able to stay up with those 2 boards. Traditional journalists can't be everywhere, so citizens offer more eyes that can find important stories. Citizen journalists often come from underserved populations as well, and this is really important because this is one of the major pushes for citizen journalism. They may represent groups that in the past have been oppressed and ignored. They may come from economically disadvantaged communities that are often ignored by traditional media. We have that in the US, as does every country. Here, it's mostly people of color. They offer a broader view of the world, and that is valuable. But there are also problems with citizen journalism. And a major one is that without the resources of a major news outlet, they're more open to lawsuits. They don't have the resources to defend themselves, and the cost could be great. Here in the US, we have many lawsuits against journalists that are called nuisance suits. They are filed just to cost the news organization money. So they'll maybe not do another negative story in the future. They might not even win the case, but the fact that they're causing that organization to spend money on attorneys could put them out of business. So citizen journalists cannot afford to defend themselves from such things. Citizens can also open themselves up to physical threats, and this is a very serious issue. When I was in Indonesia in 2010 and 2011, at least 2 environmental journalists were killed. One was found handcuffed to a tree floating down a river. I worked in South Sudan for a year. Journalists there were also sometimes killed, but more often they were sent to prison. There is safety in numbers, so citizens working by themselves or in small groups could find themselves in danger, depending on what stories they cover. Most people, though, will not be covering those kinds of stories that would get them killed. So perhaps the biggest issue for citizen journalists is the lack of training. Journalism is a profession, and training is needed. All journalists need to understand how to research a story, how to tell if information they've uncovered is true or not, even how to write a story in a way that will get people to pay attention. Many people want a story covered because it benefits them. So a journalist needs to understand how to avoid bias and know how to verify whether a story is truthful. And remember, when we talked about credibility, credibility is not about whether or not your work is trusted by it is about whether or not your work is trusted by your audience. Journalists gain that trust by offering information without major bias, information that is truthful, and that only happens when journalists have high standards. Years ago, this was part of the gatekeeper role. Remember we talked about that earlier? To make sure only truthful information made it through the gates was a very important role for gatekeepers. This is also something citizen journalists must learn and honor through their work. If they do that, they'll grow an audience. And if they don't, it will be difficult for them to survive. For journalists, credibility is all we have to offer. So what advantages can citizen journalists bring to your organization if you're working for a news organization and you want to involve citizen journalists more? They expand your reach. Just about any topic can be covered, and that's important. They also have speed of reporting. Citizen journalists are everywhere. They are on the scene. Just as that 17-year-old girl at the George Floyd killing was there with her phone. There were no media outlets there at that time. She was able to get that video. The speed of reporting is important. And they bring a regional and local focus that news outlet may not have. So my friend Harry Sarhadi is ready to talk to you in a moment, and he's going to talk about very real examples of citizen journalism that he started. He's done some amazing work, and you're going to find what he did fascinating and very instructive. And then there'll be time for questions. But I want to leave you with one final thing. I've talked a lot about the disruption the journalism profession has faced over the past 20 years, and it has been disruption. In the United States, thousands of journalists have lost their jobs during that time. As many as 1/3 of all journalists who were working before technology changed the world. And their jobs are not coming back. But now new jobs are being created and more opportunities are out there as well. But most importantly, the changing technology has done one really important thing. When I was first a journalist, I was working in radio. To edit an interview, we had to take a razor blade and cut out the parts of the tape that we didn't want and tape back together the parts we wanted to keep. And we might make the wrong cut, and then you have to place things together, or you might lose a piece of tape. It was sometimes a really difficult process. And many people who were very good writers couldn't develop the skill to do the editing. So often they didn't get jobs. The people who got the work were often those who could use a razor blade but couldn't write as well. So those with technical abilities often won out over those who were creative. This is the thing that I love about this. Today, the technology has changed all that. The tools are incredibly easy to use. So you're no longer blocked from a job because you can't use a razor blade. And the many ways you can distribute your work mean that people cannot stop you from publishing if you have something important enough and worthwhile enough to say. So this is a great time to be a journalist. You can experiment, you can invent, and you can create. And that's the message I want to leave you with. So my thanks to the U.S. Embassy, and particularly to Nadia there and the who's the events coordinator, for bringing me into this conversation. And I look forward to your questions after we hear from my good friend, Harry Sarhadi. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Dale, for a very interesting pictures and also presentation. Yeah, there are already several questions about that. We will read the question later after Pak Hari's presentation. Okay. So, Pak Hari, the screen is yours now. Please, you can start your presentation.
Thank you, Mbak Karina. I will share my screen, my presentation. Wait a moment. Okay. Here is the title. I'm a bit not confused, but what should I tell to this event? And it's about three things I would like to share. One is citizen journalism. Second is the science citizens, and how public can share information to media. And I remember Dale share pictures of CGNet. I know Shu Baranshu is the one who developed the CGNet, this another kind of citizen journalism in India. Why they use voice? Because most of it is in central India, where most of the people cannot write in alphabet. So it's difficult for them to send text in cell phone. So they decide to use voice rather than text. And I asked Arjun. Arjun is the guy who developed the system, to go to West Kalimantan in 2011 when I started my model of citizen journalism. And he installed the similar system in Ruai TV. But people in West Kalimantan won't use the voice because they're afraid of their voice being recognized by the government, by the police, if they report something that the government don't like. I pretty much Dale already explains about citizen journalism. I would like to share why I start the citizen journalism model. I started in 2011 when I was not working anymore with any media. I was received a Knight International Journalism Fellowship to do my to do this, develop the model of citizen journalism in West Kalimantan. As a journalist working for more than 20 years, I realized that media has power. Supposedly, media also has idealism. For example, one of the idealism is give voice to the voiceless. Unfortunately, at least I know in Indonesia, mainstream media only serving 30% of population at the top of the social pyramid. Only people who can buy the magazine, buy the newspaper, or put on ads on television, or buy products that advertised in the television, newspaper, all those population that's served by the media, and neglected population on the bottom of the pyramid. This can probably 60% of the population. They never read newspaper. In the remote area in West Kalimantan, in other area in Indonesia, most of them never read newspaper. They never read Kompas. Kompas is the largest newspaper. At that time, it's about 500,000 a day, the circulation. But people in the villages, remote area, they never read any newspaper. And they only watch TV. TV is only TVRI, is the supposedly national TV. That's the population that needs to access the power of the media. And unfortunately, media become a big business and they forgot their idealism. One of the reasons that they facing limitation, they have not enough reporters to cover issues, news, far away from the city. This is, then I try to find what is the citizen journalism. Dale already said, but I would like to focus on this two definitions important that I highlighted. I took it from Encyclopedia of American Journalism. Citizen journalism is journalist practices by citizen reporters are defined as citizen journalism, through which ordinary citizens write, report, edit, and send image, take video, and audio to other audiences. The internet technology make it happen. The other sentence is citizen journalism is maintained by citizens who are often marginalized and dissociated by mainstream news media. These two keywords, marginalized and dissociated by with mainstream news media. That's the idea is get into my mind, and I'm thinking of how to connect them to mainstream media. They are the population under the social pyramid. And the other thing is I found this research by Banda in South Africa. She said that supposedly citizen journalism practice enhancing aspect of democratic citizenship. There are 7 democratic aspects of democratic citizenship. First is ownership of communication channel. Citizen journalists should have their own communication channels. Second, civic participation to enhance their civic participation. Now, pretty much they cannot participate in any decision making, for example. The third is access and accessibility. Most of them live far away from the city, far away from the center of the power. They have no access and accessibility for many things. The fourth is deliberation and thoughtful debate among citizens. There is no chance they can debate, a thoughtful debate. The fifth is decision making or action by citizen is another thing, action by citizen. Sixth is the power to hold public officials to transparency and accountability. This is also important, which I show that my model of citizen journalism help the citizen to hold public officials to transparency and accountability. And 7 is interactivity. That's the basic of the model of the citizen journalism that I developed. I do not call it citizen journalism, actually. I call it information broker. People who brokerage the information to media, to other parties, to other citizens, to other institutions, how they brokerage information. I try to think out of the box of journalism. This is not 100% journalism. This is not a point of view of the media, mainstream media. This is from the point of view of a citizen. How media could empower communities, how communities or citizens can access the power of media. So internally, we call it information brokers. And outside for other, we say this is citizen journalism. And I do not translate citizen journalism into Indonesian words, jurnalisme warga, because it's that term belong to mainstream media. I mean, that's not something that really can express the idea of information broker. The information broker is that the role that something important for community members and for general public. And it's about citizen scientists. Information broker can be upgraded with more skills, such as using GPS tracker, for example. Because you have a smartphone, you have GPS. You can find what you call it, the GPS that you can exactly where you are. That's we can enhance, upgrade information broker or citizen journalist to citizen scientists. Who are they? Who are information brokers? They are community members. It should be community members who often marginalized and dissociated. That's the idea. And the practice of information broker to enhance 7 aspects of democratic citizenship. That's the concept. I also found that the citizen wants to report, but citizens want to file report of any misconduct, conflict, bad services, environmental destruction, corruption, especially petty corruption. That's small, but it's impacts, big impact to the citizen. They, most of the time, they don't know where to report to, or they are afraid of. When they are in conflict, usually, they have to face the police or military, not only, for example, if they in conflict with corporate that disrupt the environments. When they protest, they face the police and military. And experiences teach them that they always lose when they fight for their rights or when they are in conflict with corporates. Most of the time, that means in conflict with powerful parties, local government, local policymakers, police, military, and sometimes thugs. I started the idea then, after accumulation of ideas, I sent a proposal to International Center for Journalists, and they granted me fellowship. They give me some grant to develop Ruai SMS. Ruai SMS is hosted in the Ruai TV. It's a local television station in Pontianak, West Kalimantan. At that time, information broker or citizen journalists sent information through SMS only. I use Frontline SMS. That's open source software. And SMS blasted to subscribers. At that time, there were 90 phone numbers of high-level local government officers and also local journalists. In 2013, I start in national level with Tempo SMS. And Tempo SMS also using similar system, Frontline SMS, and published in the website of Tempo. In Ruai TV, the SMS sent by citizen journalists also appear on news ticker on the screen of TV. And in Ruai TV, I also developed the Ruai, I forgot the name, but it's using voice, but nobody use it because they are afraid of their voice is recognized. And Tempo SMS been used by Judicial Commission, Corruption Eradication Commission, WWF Indonesia, in Aceh, South Sumatra, Lampung, West Kalimantan, Central Kalimantan, and many areas. And there were almost 200 information brokers, citizen journalists of Tempo SMS at that time. Information broker or citizen journalists, we translate it into jurnalis rakyat. Why? Because this is not only a model of citizen journalists. This is a movement. How media, responsible media, give voice to the voiceless. Citizen journalists or jurnalis rakyat is eyewitness. They can only report events, observation, and data only, back to basic of journalism, only sending facts, not opinion. Now, most of the media, they love opinion. They interview people about something, even somebody who probably has no expertise, but still the media interview them. And in 2019, Tempo SMS become Tempo Witness. What is Tempo Witness? This is before explaining what is Tempo Witness. This is the impact of Ruai SMS and Tempo SMS. It's helped resolve two big conflict, not immediate, of course. The conflict resolved after more than 10 months. They using SMS, send it to Ruai SMS, and the community won the conflict. And Tempo SMS also has impact. This is the testimony SMS sent by the information broker or jurnalis rakyat Tempo SMS. It's about the fund for the schools, elementary schools. You can read it, but I'm sorry, Del. This is in Indonesian language, but it's tell that after the journalist rakyat sending information on the transparency of a grant that given to elementary school, it's changed. The second case is it's about the toll road development. That's the impact of how citizens only using SMS and connect to mainstream media, they can create impact, big impact. Basic concept, now I'm explaining Tempo Witness. Basic concept of Tempo Witness. Tempo Witness is a media. That's the problem of the people who would like to report. They can get sue using information and electronic transaction law. When they send it to social media, or they have their own blog even, or they just say something and other citizens record it and share it in the social media. There are many cases in Indonesia. Second, Tempo Witness is idealism of media, which is tempo, to give voice to the voiceless. And this is important, the third, no news value applied. What kind of value applied? It's a public interest applied. If the citizen journalists think this information is important for public, then they can publish it, send it to Tempo Witness, and Tempo Witness will publish it. There are 5 components of Tempo Witness. First is trusted community members as citizen journalists. Remember, community members. We have to get the background of this person or citizen who would like to join. And the second 2 days training workshop, this is they have to follow training workshop before we registered as a citizen journalist for Tempo Witness. And in Tempo, we have at least 20 trainers who are also editors at Tempo. And 4, this communication channel connected or part of Tempo.co. And the 4th is, and the 5th is smart. I'm sorry for the typo. Smartphone application. We developed smartphone application. You can find it at Play Store and iStore. And the 5th is the 6th is the information. Of course, they have to report information. That's the basic concept of Tempo Witness. Okay, how you use Tempo Witness? It's I can say Tempo Witness can be used as tools or platform for monitoring, reporting, verification, and evaluation, especially if related to environment issues. Citizen journalists or information broker will monitor and report and verify the information before they send it to Tempo Witness. An editor verified and evaluates after they edit the report. Citizen journalists and citizen scientists combine, or we increase or upgrade citizen journalists and citizen scientists with only understand simple science from scientists. Monitoring and reporting climate change indicators, for example. Citizen journalists or citizen scientists, citizen journalists who upgrade into citizen scientists can measure rainfall using measuring cylinder, for example. Measure and determine trees diameter. What for? To measure how much carbon stored in a tree. It's a lot of work. Or they can monitor REDD plus project, that's about environments. Or they can monitor and reporting biodiversities to identify plants, insects, fishes, frogs, toads, mushrooms, leeches, birds, and etc. Or they can monitor and reporting rivers, lake, forests, human-wildlife conflicts. It's been done with WWF Indonesia. Illegal poaching and wildlife trade, or air pollution, or other issues, not environment, although it's most of the time related to environment also. Monitoring and reporting election, monitoring and reporting government officer, or development projects, corruption, petty corruption, and migrant workers. This is the appearance of Tempo Witness apps. People, citizen journalists already registered, can report video or photo or text or audio. That's the Tempo Witness. I will stop here and we will go to question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Hari and Dale, for a very interesting presentation from different angle. Yeah, we already have several questions in Instagram and YouTube, which I will read very soon. Maybe I will start with mine first, Dale. You mentioned earlier that citizen journalism is powerful, right? But there is also challenges because they are not like a professional or like a trained one, like a professional journalist. And therefore, it also potentially sharing like hoax or fake news, right? What do you think about that, Dale? Maybe you could just answer a very brief, yeah, because later I will read a question from audience.
I think that's a major concern, and Pak Heri talked about it. And the idea of sharing bad information is an important one. We've experienced that in our elections here in the U.S., and it's disturbing because it can be disruptive in many different ways. And I'm concerned about all the false information that's still out there around the election and also around COVID. We have many people in the U.S. who will not take the vaccine because they think that it is an opportunity for the government to put microchips in them. So that's why I talked about the training. The training is so important to be able to make that distinction for those who are putting information out to understand the difference between something real and something not. But there's also, I think, a huge need for the media to educate the public about this as well, so the public can be more aware and challenge information and understand it on their own terms too. So I think there's a role for both citizen journalists to understand and get the training to do this well, but also it's important for citizens themselves, the news consumers, to understand this possibility and question everything they say, everything they read and see.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Pak Dale. Yeah. I move on to Pak Hari. Yeah. One short question. You and your Tempo witness, I see that you do the part of educating public, yeah, as Dale mentioned earlier, yeah. How do you think media, maybe especially in Indonesia, try to their effort to empower people, yeah, instead of seeing this citizen journalism or, as in your word, information broker, yeah, instead of become their competitor, yeah, quote unquote. So how do you think media in general, yeah, can also do empowering people, equip them, educate them to also create like a responsible and, you know, the content of the reporting is also maybe not like as a professional as journalists, but at least they have the principles, they know the principle. What do you think, Pak Hari? Brief.
That's why any community members, remember, it should be, the person should be, our citizen should be community members, not an individual asking, I would like to join Tempo Witness. No, you cannot. You have to belong to the community members, trusted community members. Then they have to join the training workshop. At least if it's in the pandemic, we have an online training workshop for 6 days. Each day, 2 hours. They have online, and we train them on basic journalism. That's the first. The second, citizen journalists or journalist rakyat Tempo Witness, they can only send facts on the form of an event as an eyewitness event only, or based on their observation and data. That's 3 things they can send it. No opinion piece, because it can be, opinion is cheap for us journalists. The fact is more important than opinion. That's why. And the video, we limit the video only 59 seconds only. It's enough. It's enough. So after they join the training workshop, they become very critical because we're trying to embed how journalists think, how journalists see information, how journalists see the situation, and how they get the facts. Not most of the time, people seeing things, they making opinion or analyze the situation. That's the problem. That's why they have to join the training workshop before we register them. You can download their apps, but you cannot get or log in to Tempo Witness before we register.
So we have like the trained citizen journalism, yeah, citizen journalism, yeah, the trained one. Not like random people can post. No. We should have like more and more a platform or movement or any activities?
For example, now we are training indigenous people community. We already trained 2 groups already. We will train another 3 groups, each group 15 indigenous people community members. So, for example, they belong to a community, or we train a network. The community belongs to WWF Indonesia, who live near the forest to monitor the human and animal conflict, or just to monitor the poachers or wildlife trades. That kind of they belong to a community. Community we can see as a village or desa or dusun bahkan, or dusun. It's smaller than desa. They belong to one place of desa is village, one village. They belong to village community. So they can apply, but they have to join the training.
Thank you, Pak Hari. That's very interesting. It leads us to further discussion on that area, and also Dale. We have several questions on other platform in Instagram and YouTube, but I will give the first chance to question from Zoom. Yeah, we will invite Pak Erwin Ramadan, a former journalist, also a lecturer, to share his first question in this session. Please, Pak Erwin, the screen is yours.
Yes, I already wrote down my questions, so I'll read part of it. Question number 1, is there not an urgent need for specialization in environmental journalism, for the public to focus on crucial issues? Because when we talk about environment, we talk about everything, in fact. But we should concentrate on a few important things, like sinking cities in Jakarta, or like drinking water in Flint in the US. Okay, question number 2. Could the environmental journalist become a kind of jack of all trades of environmental journalism? Because I see that quite often. And I don't feel myself competent unless I specialize in one field. Okay? So environmental journalism, whether it's for mainstream media or citizen journalism. Question number 3, has environmental journalism, mainstream and citizen, become as dangerous as investigative journalism? I tend to think so, because we have had a few, quite a lot of killings in both kinds of journalism. I have one remark to make. You know, I reported on the first UN Stockholm Environment Conference in 1972. Sadly, very sadly, I have to say that my articles from 49 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, are not yet outdated. And it's with infinite sadness that I have to say that we are still doing the same kind of journalism. Thank you.
Thank you. Dale, you want to go first?
Agus. Pak Erwin, thank you for those questions and for the work you've done over the last 50 years. Specialization is important. It's funny that you mentioned that. I've been very angry this week. Our national broadcaster, National Public Radio, is a place where I still do some work, and they had an interview, the first interview with the person who heads a major environmental position in our government, a woman named Gina McCarthy. And the interview was given to the political reporter who covers the White House. And this angers me because then the interview becomes about, we call the horse race, who's ahead, who's behind, who's winning, who's not, instead of about the important environmental issues, because the political reporter doesn't understand the environment. I think specialization is very important. I think these are the issues that are the most important thing we can cover for the rest of my lifetime, and perhaps that of many of the people watching. I think environmental issues are critically important, and we need to understand them, and this is why I do what I do. The idea of jack of all trades for environmental reporters is a concern, but I think that if you have a base level of knowledge in environment, even if you're reporting many different issues, some that you know less about than others, you're still going to do a better job than the political reporter or the sports reporter. So you're right, it'd be nice to have several environmental reporters with specialties in different areas. I would be grateful at this point to have one or two generalist environmental reporters in every news outlet, because they don't have them. So my expectations, I think, are a little lower than yours. I would like to have many environmental specializations in newsrooms, but I'd be grateful now just to have several environmental reporters. And the idea of the danger, it depends on where you are. Here in the U.S., environmental reporters are at less risk of being killed, but journalists in general here are under attack. Police in protests are now targeting journalists. But in a place like Indonesia, as I mentioned, when I was there, at least 2 environmental journalists were killed. I think that year there were 3, and one was covering mining up in Papua. But at least 2 environmental journalists were killed, and business interests. There are bad business interests who have concern over negative media, and they will go to great extents in some countries to prevent news from being covered. So I think you're right. I think environmental journalism is just as dangerous as investigative journalism. And in fact, some of the best investigative journalism out there is environmental journalism too. But I agree with you on all 3 of those issues, and I appreciate you raising them.
Yeah, thank you, Dale. Pak Hari, you would like to add some of your opinion?
Yeah. Terima kasih, Pak Erwin, ya, pertanyaannya. In the beginning, from the beginning, I start my journalism. I specialize in environment reporting. Why? Because I have no competitors. Nobody wants to be specialized in environmental reporting. That's why I like it. Why? Because it's we see environment every day, the environment destruction, all this environmental problem, we see it every day. And yes, when I start, there's almost no specialized in any media for environmental reporters. And 15 years ago, I found the Society of Indonesian Environmental Journalists, the organization. It's 15 years ago. On the Earth Day, today is the 15th birthday of the Society of Indonesian Environmental Journalists. And now the member of the Society of Indonesian Environmental Journalists, I think is more than 200 journalists from all over Indonesia and from any media. So it's something that growing. The interest to become the environmental reporters is growing, and more funding for journalists to report on the environment. I'm helping put a center on the Rainforest Journalism Fund for Southeast Asia. It's a big number of grant can be shared with any journalist who want to report rainforest issue. And yes, in some country, the numbers of environmental journalists is decreasing. Yes, because more journalists would like to be political journalists or economic journalists or sports, but not for environment. Why? Because it's they reluctantly learning about environment, because to become an environmental reporters, environmental journalist, you have to know a bit about biodiversity. You know about not only a forest, but a species of trees and other science things. So it's not easy. I can say it took me about probably 10 years to know. I can say I can know a little bit about the environment. But every time I do reporting on environmental issue, I learn more, something new. That's probably the spirit of journalists now. They I don't know, probably they don't like to learn more. They just want to publish something. I don't know. That's my comments.
Thank you, Pak Hari and Dale. Yeah, we have plenty of questions in Facebook, Instagram, and also YouTube. Yeah, I tried to read some of them. Yeah, I will ask in one question if the comment or question are similar or related. The first question in Instagram from the account OMG She Spoke. What are the harms of citizen journalism? Pak Hari or Dale, maybe Pak Hari, you can continue with the your opinion, the harms of citizen journalism, if any.
Dale, you first.
Okay. Well, I think Harry and I will agree on this. I think we'll have similar things to say, which is we've touched on some of them. I mean, to me, one of the biggest harms is something we've all discussed, which is the problem with fake information, what America has begun calling fake news, and the ability for people who aren't concerned about their community but want to manipulate and want to change public opinion in a negative way. And that's the biggest concern in my mind, is that problem. And this is where the training is so important. I love Harry's programs because there is a training component involved always. And there's a responsibility that comes with presenting journalism, whether you're part of the mainstream media or whether you're a citizen journalist. In order to be a journalist, you must understand the responsibility that comes from being a journalist. And to me, that's most critical. So the harm can be great, just as the harm can be great if the mainstream media does bad things, which some outlets have done historically. So the harm is the same. And we need to guard against that. And this is why I recommend, too, that we help educate the public to understand and be able to tell the difference between not news. I don't like the phrase fake news, but not news and what actually is news and important to understand. Harry? Okay.
I think Dale already explained it. I want to respond. I'm really aware of the harm to the citizen journalists. That's why I developed this model. Tempo Witness is a media. It's not a site, or it's not a social media. It's a media. It's part of Tempo. So according to press law, it's a media. Yes, the definition is if Tempo Witness a media. So when there's a dispute, when citizen journalists send the information to Tempo Witness, and the dispute goes to Dewan Pers or press, how do you call it in English? Dewan Pers is press council that will resolve the conflict between somebody who protests. The second is the training workshop. when they join the training, I try to put them in the middle of afraid to send fake news or fake information or not news, but they really would like to report something important. So they afraid of, so they will never send the fake news or not news or the opinion. The third is they only can send three things. The event they can record with the smartphone. That's the facts. The editor cannot edit it. They can only take the video using the apps. You cannot get another video and send through the apps. No, you cannot. It should be from the apps. Then you send it to Tempo Witness. And of course, the third is observation. Observation also, you using your camera, smartphone camera, to observe. For example, when they want to report a broken bridge, they just making video and add the 4W, where, when, where, and who. They write the text of the photo or the video. That's all. That's the only thing they can send. Is it enough? Yes. Even only text, SMS, it create impact to the society, to the public. So that's why we developed the Tempo Witness. So when there are disputes, Tempo editors will be the person who will get the problem, will get the trouble. That's my answer.
And I want to jump in real quick if I could, because I want to build on that. You know, I talked about disruption, and I saw someone on Zoom asking about whether citizen journalism will push out mainstream media. But it's because of efforts by Harry that citizen journalism will replace it and become mainstream media. And this is part of that disruption. We're in this place where everything is sort of mixed, but there will always be a mainstream media. There's an immense need for a professional journalism class that can help inform the public.
Yeah.
So that will remain, but it will become more inclusive. And that's what citizen journalism is doing, is it's pushing those voices that haven't been heard to be heard. And that's the value to me. That's an immense value of citizen journalism.
Yeah. And I would like to add also, you know, my purpose in the next 5 years, Tempo Witness will have 1 million citizen journalists that we can create impact. How we can get that? We just did 2 training of trainers for citizen journalism in 2 cities. And now we will start offering, if any small media in that cities would like to have a model of the Tempo Witness, they can have it. They can have their own citizen journalism similar with Tempo Witness. They can have their own name, or they can connect to Tempo Witness. They train their own citizen journalists. They develop a new media. Who is the reporter? The reporter is citizen. The editor is the journalist. That's how we accumulate the numbers.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Pak Hari and Dale. Yeah, which lead us to the next question. Yeah, we have plenty of questions in Instagram from the account @Karimais. How can we ensure that citizen journalists share their thought that healthily challenge mainstream media while also ensuring authority and accountability over their action? Dale?
Well, Harry, why don't you go first?
Yeah, can you read it again?
Yeah, how can we ensure that citizen journalists share their thought that healthily challenge mainstream media while also ensuring authority and accountability over their action?
First, they don't share their thoughts. They share the facts that they find.
Okay.
Yeah, that's wrong. Sharing thought is not a journalism.
Right.
Sharing facts is journalism. And how to make sure it's not the competitors of the, you mean the competitors of the media. This is a kind of a social responsibility of the media to open access for communities who alienated by mainstream media. We open access. Tempo open an access for citizen journalists, for citizens to share information that probably never been into the media if they're not share it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Pak Dale, the next question, do you want to add on Pak Hari? Because the next question specifically to you, Dale.
Well, let me just say very quickly that I want citizen journalists to be competitors to mainstream media, because what we've seen is that when that happens, mainstream media starts paying attention. When I ran my news organization in this town, one of the things that angered me is that our local schools were not covered. This is a small community I live in, about 28,000 people, and school activities are very important. Sports, music, all those things, even the school board. Our school system here has a larger budget than our town does, and no one was covering it. When we started covering it, the mainstream media started showing up. They started doing their job. They started reporting on the voices that weren't being heard. So I want citizen journalists to challenge the mainstream media so they become better. And I think that's an important part. And Harry's right.
I have a different thing of this. I see citizen journalism as a partner of media. I have an example in West Kalimantan. Because of these journalists, local journalists subscribe the Ruai SMS, they get information and they creating the news based on that facts.
Like a mutualism from both.
Yeah. So there is many things that citizen journalists cannot do. For example, there's no interview for citizen journalists tempo witness. So I don't teach interview. So only real journalists can interview the government. So when they get the information from the citizen journalists, the real journalists can follow up the story, can interview, can get more facts that citizen journalists cannot get. I can say it's a mutual benefit for citizen journalists and real journalists.
Well, I don't disagree. But what will happen is if those collaborations do not cover those people who are not being heard, some other citizen journalists will come up and challenge them. So I want that challenge to keep happening. So all these voices that have never been heard finally have a chance to lift up their voices.
Yes. Right.
So,
yeah, Dale, the next question is for you. Hi, Dale, from Instagram account at rimski00. Could you talk more about the legal repercussion of the spread of inaccurate news by citizen journalism, particularly in the U.S.?
Yeah, I can only talk about U.S. Harry would obviously know much more about it there. It's a very complex situation. We have lawsuits, or we have laws about saying things that are untrue about someone publicly. We have laws about putting out false information about people. In our last election, in Georgia, there was a question raised by the people working for President Trump. It was unfounded, but there were questions raised about the voting machines that were used, that people would use that would total the votes. And people were saying, public officials were saying horrible things about this company and how terrible they were and how their equipment was doing bad things. None of that is true. Absolutely none of that is true. And the company is now suing them. And in some cases, they're asking for $2 billion in damages to their business. So in a situation like this, having these laws are very important. For citizen journalists who don't understand this, they run a great deal of risk. This is why Harry's talking about having people who have been well trained. We call it vetting, that make sure that the information is truthful and of importance, so that the citizen journalists don't make that decision because they're not trained in that. And they have to be careful in what they say. And this is one of the things that we need. Remember disruption. So we have people doing things that they've never done before, and doing new things and trying to get their voices heard. And that's wonderful. But with that comes a need to understand how to do this in a way that doesn't put out bad information, that doesn't make false claims against people or companies, and that is truthful in every respect.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
May I comment on that?
Sure. Harry.
In my experiences, there is no citizen journalist being sued. That citizen journalist that belongs to my program. There is no one being sued. I remember one of the citizen journalists trained in West Kalimantan. When they meet me, they told me that the police who want to take him into custody, when they meet me now, they greeting like this. So when they connect, when the police know that this person connect to media, it seems that they trying not to. They can. The citizen journalist seems like have power.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dale and Pak Hari. The next question is related to what you just discussed. Yeah. There are two different questions actually, but I think it's related. Different with professional journalists, citizen journalists, first, they don't have any ethic code like a journalist. Yeah, that's the first one. And the second one, they are not protected like journalists when something happened to them. Yeah, it's different with professional journalists that they are protected by the organization, for example. So how do you overcome these issues? Who wants to answer first? Dale? About the ethic code and protection.
My answer is very simple. Pak Harry is doing this. This is what the training is about. This is important. Harry made a difference between someone talking and someone doing news. We have opinion here. So we do have opinion. They call it opinion journalism. It's really not journalism, but there's a difficulty in this country with differentiating, with telling the difference between. So we have Fox News and we have CNN, and they both have turned into opinion outlets. They're not news organizations anymore, but people call them news, and what they say is news when it's not. But so an ethical, they're very right. One of the problems with citizen journalism is a lack of ethical code. The media has done a terrible job over the years educating the public about why we are needed. So the public takes this for granted and doesn't understand. That's really important. When the internet and email and all these things started, I had a friend who sent me this note once, and it was about someone sent a note saying, "Oh, be careful, young men, when you go to bars. Beautiful women will come up to you and they'll take you home, and you wake up suddenly, they'll have drugged you, and you wake up in a bathtub of ice with a note that says, go to the hospital. And you go to the hospital and you find out that they've removed your kidneys and selling them for transplant in South America." And my friend sent this note and said, "Oh, this is horrible. This is terrible." And I wrote back and said, if they remove your kidneys, you're dead. You're not waking up again. But they were so used to the media being the organization that separated this stupid stuff from real facts that they just took it for granted that it was real. They didn't do any critical thinking to understand it wasn't. So we need to educate the public on the need for this kind of critical thinking on the part of journalists. And that comes to ethical standards too. But you're right, also citizen journalists are not as well protected. And that's the difficulty here. Although there have been many lawsuits here, some were needed. Some citizen journalists were just saying horrible, terrible things that simply were not true. So those lawsuits were intended to stop that, but they're not protected, and that is a concern. But what Harry does is he begins to, through his training, institute those sort of ethical understandings, and this is why citizen journalism will eventually become a part of the mainstream media because of the work that Harry and others like him do in that training field. So Harry, I'll let you talk more clearly about that.
Yes, citizen journalism has no code of ethics, yes. Professional code of ethics, because they're not professional. They are citizens. If they are farmers, they're still farmers. They just send information to media. That's why to overcome that risk for citizen journalists, when they send crucial information that probably impact to them, they can send it anonymously, although the editors know who sent it. Since temper witness is categorized as media based on the press law, so when they send information anonymously, the editor treats it as anonymous information source. So when there's a dispute, the editor will responsible, taking the responsibility for that challenge. And again, through the training workshop, I told them that, of course, the code of ethics of professional journalism not applied to them, but they still have to follow the common ethics. So they have to follow the common ethics. And the editor will make sure when they get the information, the editor will check based on the professional code of ethics of journalism. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale and Pak Hari. Time goes by so fast. We have still plenty of questions, but I will close the Q&A session with one last question from YouTube. The question actually more on personal experience in both of you. What was your most memorable, or the reporting or doing investigation on environmental issues? Dale and Pak Hari, maybe you want to share one of the most memorable environmental reporting that you've done before. This is the last question for both of you.
Harry, why don't you go first?
Okay. When I do environmental reporting, it's always investigative, very small investigative. For example, if you see, if you're reporting the pollution, the river pollution, you have to find something that's been covered up by the company, by anybody who pollute the river. So I remember that another thing, when I train journalists on environmental journalism, I always say to them that before you do the report, you have to have a purpose. What kind of purpose? Purpose, when you publish the story, there will be impact. For example, if you're reporting polluting river, after you publish the story, the government will do effort to clean the rivers. That's the impact. That kind of impact that always in the mind of the environmental journalists. I remember I reporting it's a long time ago in 1990 something, in the middle of the 90s. I reporting a plastic trash importing from the US, from Netherlands, from all over developed countries, came to Indonesia, containers, and I do the investigating. And it took several months to see the impact that the government issued a three-ministry decree to ban the plastic trash import. That's one impact. After 8 months later, or even more than 1 year, the government sent back the containers of the plastic to Netherlands, 80-something containers. You can imagine it's a lot of plastic trash back to Netherlands. That's one of the, I used to make it an examples of environmental reporting with a purpose. Thank you.
Hari, how about you, Dale? What is it?
Well, first I want to say this is one of many reasons why Harry is one of my heroes. And I remember that story, actually. I don't remember that you were involved, but I remember that story. So I'm going to share my screen. This is, I wanted to find this photo because this was very important to me. I spent a year in South Sudan, and South Sudan is the world's newest country. And it was formed in, I think it was 2011, and it's been at war mostly the rest of that time with very, very small periods of peace. And I was working at a small radio station in a village called Tourle, and I was a trainer there, trying to help make their staff professional in what they were doing. And the thing that you know, there are many things that I'm proud of and many things that I've done that I think are important. But this one in particular, I worked at a radio station that was every day saving lives. And it's hard to be able to say that for most people, for most journalists. We do good work, we do important work, it's necessary work. But this photograph represents one example. The woman in the pink in the background was a reporter from the station. There was a group of, there were revenge killings taking place south of us, a few kilometers south, where one village raided another village and stole some of their cattle. And cattle is currency there. It's not food. It's actually money. It stole some of their cattle. So the other village retaliated and went back and shot someone there. And then someone else came and killed someone of that village. And this group of people fled the fighting. And they just ended up in the bush. And no one quite knew where they were. Well, this reporter got a tip. And we found them. And we tracked them down. So this isn't just an environmental story, although there is an environmental component to it. So I'm off to the edge and I'm taking photographs and I have a wide lens and I hold it up over my head. And just as I snapped, this woman turned around with this plate and she was showing me what they were eating that evening and what they had been eating for several evenings. And this was a grass called cheer. And it's a grass that has no nutritional value whatsoever. So they were eating this every night, feeling full, feeling, getting rid of hunger, but they were starving to death. So we found them. She did interviews. We reported stories on the air. I got the GPS coordinates and called the UN. And within 2 days, the UN was there setting up feeding stations. So one of the proudest things I've ever done is to be associated with a news organization that was saving lives on a regular basis. And to me, there's nothing more powerful than that. You know, the work that we do, the work that Harry, that Irvin has done is immensely important. And we all, I think, have done this work because of what Harry talks about, because of the hope for impact, the hope for making a difference, for making someone's life better. And to me, it's been a huge blessing in my life to be able to do this for so long and sometimes hopefully making a little bit of a difference. But journalists who do work like that, to me, are the heroes, and the work that Harry's done. And it's saving lives. And that's one of the most powerful things journalists can do. And one of the reasons I'm so grateful and proud to be in this profession. And to thank you for letting me be able to share these stories today. And I'm greatly appreciative of this opportunity too, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dale and Pak Hari. So both of you not only sharing like knowledge and skill and information to us, but also your own story. That also very interesting and inspiring for all of us. Thank you, Dale and Pak Hari.
Thank you.
And Harry, my friend, it was great to see you.
Yeah.
We to sum up the whole session, I think one important point of this discussion is how we are able to empower people by educating them. That's what Pak Hari already did and keep on doing until now. Yeah. So as they'll put it nicely, it should be mainstream, right? Mainstream in terms, lots of people, lots of citizens, lots of community also doing this reporting. So it is not become like a competition with the media, but like a collaboration from both parts, right? So it will, I think, also help to raise issues, voice of the unheard. They have channel to talk, to share their news, and it's also educate them to report better. Okay, so I think we already passed 17 minutes from the actual schedule, and yet we still have lots of questions, which maybe I can share to you later. Many people interested in this issue, including myself. Okay, thank you, Pak Hari and Dale, for this session. Thank you, everyone, for a very fruitful question in all social media. I hope we can discuss further, maybe in another session and different platform. I give the screens back to Jasmine and at America team.
Thank you, Ibu Karian, for moderating this evening's event, and also for Pak Dale and Pak Hari for being our speakers. So earlier in the event, I asked you a social media question. What are the challenges environmental journalists face? So what are the challenges that they face? Is it the lack of environmental and scientific training, limited access to governmental data of environmental conservation, or perception in its minor relevance and compared to other topics? Well, it's actually all three, ABC. So the answer is all of the above. Congratulations to Rizky Yafi from Zoom for answering correctly. For those of you who would like to participate in our social media quiz next time, you can participate in the very beginning of the event, because that's when I'll be sharing the question. Now, earlier in the event, I also shared with you guys that America is having a giveaway. Now, how can you guys participate so you don't miss out on the 5 folding bikes that we are giving out? Check this one out.
Rayakan Earth Day selama sebulan penuh bersama @Amerika. Di bulan April ini, kami punya berbagai aktivitas seru yang dapat kamu ikuti untuk mendukung Earth Day dan melawan perubahan iklim dari rumah kalian. Kalian dapat membuat seni, memasak, memamerkan tanaman, bergaya dengan pakaian bekas, dan mencari tahu apakah kalian lebih tinggi dari sampah kalian. Kalian dapat melihat detail aktivitas-aktivitas ini dengan mengunjungi bit.ly/payearthforward. Upload satu aktivitas yang kalian pilih untuk lakukan ke Facebook, Instagram, atau Twitter, dan sertakan hashtag Earth Day, hashtag #PayEarthForward, dan satu hashtag aktivitas yang kalian pilih. Jangan lupa untuk tag @Amerika loh. Pastikan akun kalian publik ya. Kalian bisa ikutan aktivitas ini dari sekarang sampai 30 April. Akan ada giveaway 5 sepeda lipat dahon di akhir aktivitas ini untuk 5 orang yang beruntung loh.
Alright guys, so for more information about this giveaway, you guys can go to the link below at bit.ly/payearthforward. Now, for those of you who are wondering, how can you develop an awesome idea at an awesome place like America? It's really easy. You can just go to our website at www.adamerica.or.id, select Create a Program, and go to Collaborate with us. All proposals coming to us will be reviewed, and your event might be featured here soon. And while you guys are on our website, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter so you guys get updates from us once a week. We won't spam you, we promise, just once a week. Send straight to your inbox. And also don't forget to follow us on our social media. I hope you guys have a good night and see you at the next America TV event. Bye-bye, everybody.